All right, folks, how's it going? As usual, I'm going to need some kind soul to confirm or deny that audio is coming through properly, etc. Welcome to April Ash Office Hours. Uh, we've got a fun announcement. We've got sort of our classic round table about what we've been working on, and then we'll accept questions from everybody else. Um, this is kind of your everybody, y'all's meeting, right? So if the questions stop, then we're all gonna call it a day and get more time in our day back. So get your questions ready, queue them up. Um, that's gonna determine how long we spend here, basically. So I think most people here know me. My name is Zach, author of Ash Framework, and we've got two members from our core team with us that will be joining us here shortly. Um, the first is Barnabas, who you all know well, and the next is Dimitri, who I probably did not. I'm probably not going to pronounce people's names wrong or correctly here because I also didn't pronounce Barnabas. It's probably like different. I don't know. Who knows? But um, he's joined the core team as of very recently, just a couple weeks ago, and he's been around for a very long time. Um, Kind of, he does a lot of, I think, thankless work in a lot of ways. He cleans a lot of things up, he fixes a lot of bugs, and he's been very consistent in that effort. And so yeah, I'm very grateful to him and all the stuff that he's been working on. So I'm going to switch it over to our Discord view so that we can have the team say hi, uh, which is over here. And if you guys can go ahead and just say hi, make sure your audio is coming through, that sort of thing.
Hello, everybody.
Yo,
Perfect. Okay. So I will start with a little bit about what I've been working on. This is how we typically start things. And also, we have a new sort of emerging pattern where I just look at the Ash weeklies that have happened since last time, and
Mm.
go from there. So let's go ahead and take a look. A bunch of okay, yeah, right. We've got a new tool called Ash.transaction, which is basically a sort of convenience wrapper around Ash.datalayer.transaction, which is pretty nice. It handles notifications and all sorts of other things for you. Um, and this was, let's see, we've got a new template variable that was added to reference tenants in expression templates. That was added by Barnabas, which is great. Um, yeah, more yeah, this okay. This was our Ash Weekly from a couple weeks ago, and it's just kind of a bunch of small little things. I'll let you guys read that. We had our Alchemy Conf. I did an Alchemy Conf retro. Just talked about some of the talks that I thought were interesting, that sort of thing. We skipped release day because I was super busy. We got a bunch more mixed task generators like ash.gen.change, validation, preparation, custom expressions. Those are nice. Um, we got custom inputs for code interfaces. Go take a look at the Ash Weekly number 12 for more information on that, and the docs. It's basically a way to have sort of custom arguments that get mapped to the underlying action that gets called. One of our community members, Chaz Watkins, made it possible to add descriptions and labels to enum values, which is super nice. Um, Abhishek Tripathi added default sort, which is a way to make you can say like this action by default sorts using this sort order, and or this relationship by default sorts using this sort order, which is a really nice sort of compositional tool. Because before it would try to like combine the sorts and it just wasn't really very nice. And in our issue number 13, yeah, that's right, I
Hmm.
missed one. Um, and we've got a bunch of AshJSON API improvements to the Open API schema generation. We have a CVE. So this one's pretty serious. It's pretty low risk CVE, but it is important to address as soon as you can. That basically is the way that email confirmation works. You need to use a button of some kind. You can't just you have a GET request that confirms a user's email because things like crawlers and email clients and all sorts of other things will uh, visit those and confirm an email even though you don't have access to it. So those are the broad strokes of what has gone down. What I'm also working on is what am I working on? I am working on two main things. One, union queries, or what they kind of have a new name, which is combination queries, which is the ability to say like, to basically use SQL's union all, intersect, except type query combinators in the context of an Ash action. I have the prototype of that working. It needs a couple more features to be done. But it's going to be a really useful way to build a certain kind of action that you would have maybe had to do using like a manual query, or just using like a generic action if you wanted to do a certain kind of search, for example. Um, and so that'll be hopefully in the coming weeks will be done. Um, and another thing, if Oliver is around, he kind of prompted us to build something that's quite difficult but does need to exist, which is the way that expression calculations work. The way that expressions work, calculations work, and regular calculations work. The load statement doesn't use the authorization rules. Oh, you might hear my dog. Sorry. Um, the load statement doesn't use like apply the user's authorization to the related stuff that it accesses or to the fields that it accesses because they're kind of like a fence. They're meant to work that way. I don't know how loud my dogs are coming through right now, but hopefully not too bad. Um, so the basically we want to add a flag, an authorized true flag that treats the expression as if it was given with user input and authorizes the related data as if it was the user asking for that data and authorizes the expression as if it was the user asking for that expression. So that's what I'm working on. I'm gonna pass it over until my dogs start. Well, that's everything. So, but hopefully my dogs stop barking. Oh yeah, Barnabas, go ahead. Sorry, you can take over next.
All right. Yeah. So for me, just some flyby contributions to Ash. Like in the last 2 months, I wasn't here for the last Ash office hours, and otherwise just mostly using like Ash in the day job and doing work there. Yeah, and on the side, I've been playing around a little bit with like the AI tools and seeing how that goes. But yeah, today I created my first PR with just AI tools, which was pretty cool. But it was also the first time that I could get something useful out of those tools. So it's interesting.
Alrighty, Dimitri, you want to go up and if you could do maybe just introduce yourself a little bit since this is your first time coming to the meeting, and
hmm
then just sort of chat about maybe what you've been up to.
Yeah, I'm like long time contributor, but usually I contribute when I encounter a problem, and ideally it's a small problem, and I just fix it and go on. So like, I work on a company called Scribble Vet. It's about like AI for veterinarians, and the tasks that I'm like doing on this like week. So it's about adding tenancy to resources. And for example, I encountered a bug with migration generator that like I saw Zach, you already looked at it. It's like it's pretty small one, but it just like uses wrong tenancy. Yeah, I just like create PR, move on. That's it. So quite comfortable existing in this way. Uh, yeah, and if it doesn't matter, I mean, I'm from Lithuania. Like, I mean, not originally, but I'm located there in Europe. Yeah, I mean, like a hobby, I also contribute to other like open source projects. It's not like Ash is not first one big. There was like Hex language that I contributed a lot, and it's kind of a cool one because it's like really heavy on macros and it's typed. It's typed macros. You can create types on the fly, and it's like has even like more powerful pattern matching than Elixir. For example, you can say or, so you can select 3 or 4 with like a pipe. In Elixir, unfortunately, you have to like make separate cases for that. You can say like 3 or 4. You have to say 3, do that, 4, do that, uh, and then like Godot, it's like an open source game engine. There's Unity, Unreal Engine. I actually use Godot in like my hobby. Recent project is about karaoke. I tried to learned how to make my own karaoke videos. Like seems like the tools improved so much with like advent of AI, it's partially contributed to that, and it's now really trivial to remove voice from the songs, which was really hard. Now it's super easy. But I'm trying to experiment with my own way of visualizing karaoke because I seem to think that there is ways to improve the current format. That's for me.
Cool. Well, great to have you. Thanks for joining the team. And it is really interesting. I think everybody can learn a lesson from people like Dimitri, which is when you have a problem in open source and you take the initiative to investigate, you can often uncover the problem and get it and fix it, much faster than potentially even than asking the team to do it. And also that builds up your reputation with those people that are going to make them much more interested in helping you or in collaborating with you. And it also increases your own skill with the tool itself, which I think is really important. Like that allows you to then in the future unblock yourself and this sort of thing. And open source is a community thing. It's not a product that you're paying for, whereby somebody like owes you support. We have good support, but still, it's I think it's a great mindset to have, very valuable tools, a skill set to have as well when working with open source, is to not be willing to not be afraid to get your hands dirty, roll up your sleeves, and dive in and figure out what's going on. So something I very much appreciate about Dimitri.
Yeah, thanks for kind words, and yeah,
thank you for all your contributions so far. We don't have any questions yet, y'all. Maybe I didn't advertise this. We got 10 people here. We should have some questions. What's going on? Come on, bring them in. Maybe I should have said. I guess Barnabas did say, start asking your questions, but you gotta. We're gonna sign off if there's no questions.
Yeah, AlchemyConf was great. So if they do it next year, everybody should come.
Yeah,
it was like one of the most memorable conferences for me.
Yeah,
for sure.
I completely agree. It was a lot of fun. And we're kind of on the lookout for one of these conferences. At some point we might want to find one to do how Nerves has a Nerves Conf, like a 1-day Nerves Conf before one of the major conferences. We've been kind of, noodling over the idea of having like an Ash Conf, 1 day before or 1 day after one of these conferences. So, it would be kind of good to know. It would be kind of good to know where a bunch of our people are going to want to go. It's probably ElixirConf EU, I think, is the most likely to get the most Ash users. I'm not sure, but yeah, it'd be good to figure out what's going to be the best location for that. Okay, we got some questions. We got one question. I'll start with the easy one. Do live streams again. I want to do live streams again. I'm just so busy. I'm so busy that I don't even have time to get presentable enough to just do the same work that I'm doing. It's like mad dash helter skelter. I have a million things going on. So it's difficult. Okay. Dogbone says Ash is looking good. Second question, can you give an overview of Ash 4 main features and an ETA? Okay. I can't really give you an overview of. I'm not really sure. There's a bunch of stuff. Rebecca, our other relatively recent addition to the core team, tagged a bunch of issues properly as 4.0 in the GitHub issues page. But there's going to be some other stuff that's going to kind of go into it as well. For the most part, in the same way we did it with Ash 3, it's probably going to be like a bunch of things that are already in Ash 3 getting their default switched to something better. There's some, and just we're going to remove some potential foot guns. We want to remove the asterisk option for the accept list, where it says accept and then it's an asterisk that accepts all public attributes. It's just really dangerous in general, and it makes it difficult to reason about things, and we think people should just use the default accept option and set an explicit list of fields, just to prevent us like a whole class of sort of security bugs. We're going to add, when I finish this work with calculations I mentioned, the authorize option on calculations will probably default that to true in 4.0. It's going to be like that sort of thing for the most part. Because we don't like to just like write a feature and then like leave it nowhere, like on a future branch to then merge in 4.0. It's like we're going to make the feature but default it to off so that anybody can use it now, and then we're going to change it in 4.0 to make that the default. So yeah. Okay, thoughts on making the Ash Phoenix live view generator wire up PubSub by default? Yeah, that's a good question. So we could, probably we won't, because the way our live view generator works is different from Phoenix. Phoenix generates the like context and the table stuff like at the same time as the live view, whereas we derive the live view from the resource. And maybe we could make like a live generator that also generates a resource, now that we have resource generators actually, and then we could add in publications for create update and stuff like that. It's very possible. We kind of have a bigger problem, which is just that in Phoenix 1.8 they removed stuff from core components that our live view generators rely on, and so they're invalid. They don't work on Phoenix 1.8 in the first place. So Kenneth Kostrowski, I don't know how to say his name, but sorry, Ken. He's working on updating those to support Phoenix 1.8, and after that, I could see a world where we make some sort of PubSub to be hooked up by default, but we'd have to talk about it, I guess. All right, any more questions? Remember, there's a 30-second delay, or like a 20-second. I don't know. There's a long ass delay. Oh, pardon my French. There's a long delay. So don't like wait for us to stop talking before you answer or ask your question. Ask your question as soon as it comes to your brain.
Well, I do have questions. So like there is some there is authorizers checks and there is validations, and they kind of really close in terms of what they do. They usually get change set if it's like create action or update, whatever, and they return true false. So in case of authorizer, also kind of like unknown. So they kind of the same-ish boolean from change set, but they have different names, like like changing attribute versus changing and so on. Just like there is discrepancy in the names, and I think because validations also can be used as like where condition for changes, so it's not only like validation. So it's like I think it would be helpful if they have the same names, like consistent.
Yes,
because I know that you add expression support in validations, so that makes it again closer to each other, like in Ash 4, right? If I'm correct.
At some point, yeah. I don't know if we probably won't have to wait till Ash 4 to do that. It has to happen at some point.
No, I'm saying, yeah. So it's a question about Ash 4. If we want to maybe like align the names between validations and policy checks.
Yeah, I think it would be a great idea. I think it would be a great idea to align the names and even like the options. And I think because even for instance, changing, I think like the validation supports doesn't support like a changing to option and a changing from option, but like the check changing does. You can say like authorize if changing attribute to foo or something like that, right? So like there's all of this. I think we do need to centralize it. There's also an option about okay, so I want to make these various behaviors actually work in more places. So a good example is like validations right now only work on create, update, and destroy actions. They don't work on read actions. And however, I think we can add a callback to change that's called like, or to validation called like def supports, and it can say like change set query or action input. And then if it defaults to only supporting change set. Or maybe it defaults to supporting everything because it's like the user has to place it there. You know what I mean? Like, if I don't know, we can kind of talk about that. But then you can use a validation in those places. And so when we talk about the difference between checks, authorization checks, and validations, they are actually very different. It's just that most of the time you write a simple check, which is not very different from a validation. Like a simple check is actually very similar. So perhaps we could actually support validations themselves being used in as checks, and then that would be treated like a simple check. You know what I mean? So then we actually don't need a bunch of like the simple checks that just return true or false. We can just reuse the validations themselves. And so I think that's something I would really like to be able to do in 4.0 is like clean up those interfaces, make them support all of the different action types, and then like we can reconsider maybe we don't need a changing attributes check and a changing attributes validation. Maybe they can just be the same thing. So, yeah. Okay, we got some questions. Can you guys talk about your experience with AI dev tools? What is your experience so far? What do you foresee in the future? Specifically, how will Ash benefit from AI assisted coding? Barnabas, you've got some stuff recently. Maybe you want to chat about. I've got some thoughts too. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I've been using Aider recently, and it kind of depends on which models you use. But like most of the time, it's just I feel like I would have been faster if I did it myself. But like today, I was doing something, and then in a different terminal, I just had it running and work on something else. So if you can kind of like multitask with them for some simple stuff. So I made it create some tests today. Took a couple prompts, but I actually got it to where I was able to get it somewhere where I was comfortable with like pushing that up as a PR and stuff. Like I think I just think they are here to stay. I mean, they're not good enough maybe nowadays to really help with a lot of the Elixir stuff, but they'll probably get better. And I think just getting a feel for what's possible, and like it's the same with learning any other tool. Like it's good to just keep up to date with what's up there and what's possible. But other than like playing around, I don't really use them a lot during like day-to-day work because I just don't feel that they're as useful there yet. Also, they don't really know Ash that well. But there are like a couple of things that in the future may be interesting, like maybe exposing Igniter task as tools for the AI, and then not letting the AI rate the code, but use a tool that really knows the code to generate the code and stuff like that. And by the way, there was also today was a new episode released of what's the Groxio Underjord podcast name? So Josh was on it, and he also talked about that. So if you guys are interested in this topic, you should also go listen to that as well. Yeah, I think I've talked enough for a bit, so that's maybe Dimitri. What's your experience with AI tools so far?
Well, besides karaoke, I don't touch them much.
Okay. Yeah.
I work for a company, but personally, like, I don't like. I keep tabs on news, like look at videos, what other people do. Like some members of our team do that, like use them. I think like we will try to share the knowledge how to do it properly. But personally, I just prefer like doing it by myself at this
Yeah.
point. I think it's like really close, and it's like maybe at some point it's just like in a year, like half a year, it will be something like it clicks and it will start working in a consistent manner. But so far, like I prefer to do it myself. And just on a tangent, what really gives me like help with Ash and other is like Dash. It's like Mac only application for documentation browsing. And actually, I think for Ash is like it's multiplier. Without this, like there is documentation, it's actually pretty good. But accessibility, like when you like need to go to specific attributes in the SL, it's like requests all the time. So it's like not as snappy because like Dash is offline documentation, it downloads it, and also can generate it for every package on Elixir. So it's like you get, and browsing, search, it's like that's hands down. Like I don't
So
know.
you
Without
already
this,
have
I'm
like
not.
the multi-package search.
Yeah, and I would recommend people to try it. It's like unfortunately, it's a Mac only. That's like the one. Like I think it's maybe the only application that keeps me
There is
like Mac ecosystem. So it's like there is
Zeal,
two
like
things like
CEAL.
Zeal, and
Yeah.
the DevDocs. They're not on the same level. I think that Zeal actually like has pretty crappy interface. It's like open source, but I don't know why it's like really outdated. Plus, they have some agreements, I think, with Dash, and maybe they're like.
I think they can work with the same doc sets.
Yeah, but they not provide generated. So, for example,
that's
Ash,
true.
you will not be able to do. So, like Dash can like do all Elixir packages on the fly, and it's only Elixir. It's like Rust, whatever, like Scala, everything, like every language that has standardized docs. But there is no Windows and Linux, and I think it's like actually will be pretty good if there was like open source project in the future. But for now, it's just like Dash. If you have macOS and you work with Dash, I really recommend trying this application.
Yeah, I think
and I used it like for other stuff.
Yeah, I would say like it's so this is that's a good tangent because it actually brings up a really interesting thing. Like before I get into like my sort of thoughts and usage of AI tooling, like I would say Dimitri makes a kind of an interesting point, which is like sometimes the thing you need like isn't like an AI assistant, right? Like if your problem is that you're having like issues discovering all of the options and things that you can do with Ash, then something like Dash might be a lot better for you than than like trying to get ChatGPT or Claude or whatever to like figure out Ash. And what's interesting is like that's a skill that's going to extend like to be like useful in a lot of other ways too. So, with that said, I do use AI tooling like fairly often. Mostly for like little tiny things, like just little like edit in place stuff where I'll like I'll select some text and I'll be like, hey, add a bunch of IO.INSPECs specs in here, or like I'll say like time this function and it'll write like the timer.tc and inspect the result and some other stuff like that. Like I use it for a lot of little trivial things, but the work that I do, it like spans 3 or 4 different packages often. It's really contextual. It's just not it is not even remotely reasonable for the AI to help me with this. And I've tried so many times because I get to these really gnarly problems and I'm like, man, if I really could like just load up the right context and then ask the robot to help me and it could actually do a good job, do you know how much happier I would be? Like I really did. I have tried it many, many, many times. It's just not it's not good enough. But like it's actually dangerous. Like I've like found really subtle and incorrect bugs that I would not have spotted in a code review as nearly, and like, or I guess I did, but it didn't feel like I'm like, okay, no, I can't let this thing touch the deep innards of Ash because there's so many different ways that all of this code gets called, and it's just too risky. But on the flip side of that, I'm working on a demo app for my talk at ElixirConf EU. And that I actually very successfully used like an agent tool in Zed. Zed has a beta for their new agentic UI or agentic interface where I can say like, hey, here's what I want to do. And this goes into some of the conversation here about like an MCP server for Igniter. You don't need an MCP server for Igniter. Just give it the access to the CLI, like let it run commands in Bash, and then tell it to use mix help and to like see what the tasks are and tell it to use mix tasks to generate your resources. You already have an MCP for Igniter because mix is an interface to call mix tasks, and all of those tasks are documented with their options and all that sort of stuff. So you have this right now today. If you use Cursor or Windsurf or whatever, just tell it to use the mix generators. You have like varying degrees of success, but it does work, and that's what I did. I actually generated I had it generate 4 or 5 different resources for me, and what I found is that as the example app grew a little bit bigger and there was more examples of how I wanted things done, that I could, there's a skill here that you have to work on, which is why I think, you know, both Barnabas and Dimitri are like, you know, you keep up with these things to see what's going on. And you kind of, as Barnabas said, you maybe want to try it out. Even if it's not that great, you kind of want to see what it, you know, what it looks like. But there's a factor there of you can get better at using agentic tools. Like, for instance, as I'm learning to be a little bit more collaborative, select the context of the files that I want, to maybe like paste in some code and say, do it kind of like this, or, you know, all that sort of stuff. And so as I got a little bit better at using it, and as the size of the example app grew, it got a little bit better actually about writing Ash code. And it saved me probably an hour overall of just all the little random crap I would have had to do. And that was, to me, that was pretty meaningful. You know, it's just, I don't get to write code like that very often. So if my job was like a feature jockey, which I think there's a lot of people out there who that is what they do, right? Like your job is to like, you're working on a web app or a desktop app or something. And they're like, okay, we need a new, you know, button that makes a report that looks like this, or we need a new, you know, we need a little overview page that does, you know, I mean, that I think actually the AI stuff is pretty useful for that. And even if it's just giving you a shell of the UI or a starting point, that's pretty nice. So that's been my experience with AI tools, is like, it works.
I just remembered, one more thing that I've been recently using it a lot for is like adding module docs and stuff, and also because the LSP doesn't have a lot of the features that like other LSPs have, I've used it to do like extract a function or move something into a different module, and small tasks like that. And for that, it's really useful. And also, I use it a lot for SQL because I don't like SQL is something that I have to do from time to time, so I always forget a lot about it. And then it's nice to have the AI give you like a starter query for stuff like that. So yeah, and like HTML, CSS, it's also really good at that. But that's also something that's a bit more like subjective, or not, because it's just how it looks and feels. So it's not necessarily wrong or right in the way that like a function is. So yeah.
Yeah, like HTML, SQL, and in my case in Karaoke, I also use it at FFmpeg. It's like there's a lot of options, and it like knows them kind of all.
I've heard FFmpeg a lot as an example for that. Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of it comes to, is like, you have to take the fact that like that agents will be confidently wrong about things, and you just have to factor that into your equation to basically say like, what is the risk of the situation here that I'm building, right? So like a good example is like if I'm building like the Ash core features that I've been talking about that take all this context, and like they power like a you know, tens of thousands of use cases that I can't possibly actually conceive of in my head, and I know the agent can't as well. And so like the risk of it being confidently wrong is like really bad. But when it's talking about like, when we're talking about building a SQL query, for example, that's a great example of like, just generate me some stuff and we'll see. I don't know, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, doesn't really matter. I'm gonna run it and find out and verify it, and then I'm like, yes, this does what I want, this gives me what I want. Same with UI stuff, you know, you're like, if maybe it's just a starting point, or maybe ultimately you're like, look, I just need a UI that looks okay, like that's not the important part right now, and it doesn't really matter if like it might have a bug that, you know, is like going to make it not render the way I expect it to render, or it looks wrong on a particular screen size. That's maybe just not be your priority at that moment. So I think that's the main thing, is factoring in the risk, and, you know, relative to what you're building.
I just also add that Elixir at the moment is like in the process of adding types, and I hope it will help, because I know that many like IE generators, they use like TypeScript to check for errors. Unfortunately, right now, like in Elixir, it's not really possible. And it's interesting that it's like Gleam. I worked with it, like some fun projects. It's super typed, so maybe it's like for that. Maybe it will be interesting, but it's pretty niche.
You know, I found that because Ash does a bunch of like nice verification for you at compile time, like it has some of those properties. It's not the same thing as like a type system with it that can like fix all of your sort of values and function calls and stuff like that. But it very much does help with, you know, like you use a type in an attribute that doesn't exist or something like that, and like the error message comes out and it's like, here are the list of types that it could have been. and this isn't one of them. And like that's the sort of feedback that if your system, and so like we actually have, when you're building with declarative tools like Ash, we have some errors that even a type system would never be able to pick up for you, like a misconfigured thing, you know, like this attribute that you referenced doesn't exist over here, or this action is not defined by this resource, and all these sorts of other things that are quite useful. And I will say, like, I think, okay, slightly on a different topic about like the sort of MCP extension for Ash, for example, there's two things we have to be considering. We have to think of. There's two angles, right? There's development MCP, and then there's like a production MCP. So here's a good example. You have like a weather app, right? You want to make it so that somebody can hook up Claude to your weather app and get the weather at any given place, you know, using just the tool calls. You know, that is your production MCP. Wildly different type of thing from your development MCP, which is something you want basically while developing. You want it to be able to do all sorts of nice things for you, and, you know, reload your app or recompile your app, check for errors, all this sort of stuff. And right now they're mostly doing that using like the human tools. They're like running a language server and checking for diagnostics. Like that's why the IDEs are sort of the king of agentic tooling, is for that reason. But like, just wait a little bit. Some stuff will materialize that I think is going to be a sort of nice game changer here for development side of things. And ideally, the goal is that we don't want to build, okay, you can't build MCP services that have like 100 tools for all of these different things, right? So like the point is, we actually want something that's like sort of Elixir native, not something that's like Ash native with Ash specific tools. We want like make it something that's better at using Elixir. And anyway, we'll just I can't say any more than that. Production MCP is easy, honestly. Like, you know, and I don't think you need us to do it. Like, we're just wait till ElixirConf EU. We'll launch some stuff. And if you're curious, join the Discord. If you're not already there, you already know what we're going to launch. Like, even though we're just super secret, you know, it's like we build out in the open. Everybody knows what it is. But that has all the tools you need to build an MCP server. All you need to bring is like an MCP server shell, like some, you know, they're out there, like MCP server tools for Phoenix. And we have all the rest of the stuff that you need. You don't need to write your own JSON schema. You don't need to do any of that other stuff. So just go do, like, if you really want an MCP server in production, you could just a little bit of elbow grease, you could have it today. What were you going to say, Barnabas?
No, I thought you were done, so I was going with the next question.
Yeah, I'm good. Go ahead.
There was one before about why we can't use filter policy on create actions.
Yeah, okay. So we actually used to support them. And I think, don't we support them for like really basic ones? I think if you have a filter policy that just says like ID equals user's ID, for example, I think that'll just work, because we'll look at the attributes in the change set. We'll like apply the attributes and check those against it. But related data is actually complicated. So the example that the question mentioned was wanted to allow team members to create things in their team, but I had to wire up a custom check rather than using the same filter expression for update, read, destroy. So the reason for that is that we don't know, without actually doing the action, what the team is going to be. So because it's like, it's not a deterministic thing, because it requires like two, like with updates, for example, we're not checking the new team, we're checking the old team. So we just, like, what update things will do is actually just filter the update statement to say, like, you know, where the team also is the current team is that user's team, but creates like about new data. So it's possible that we can do some fancy stuff at some point. Maybe we can like smartly figure out, based on like calling manage relationship, that like the thing that's going to be related is going to be part of the team, but it's always going to be like sort of situational. It's not going to be something where every single thing can work, unless we add a mode for creates where we say do it and check after. You know, if you're in a transaction, this would work. Do it and then check after, and then roll back the transaction if the thing that they just created doesn't meet the filter rules. It's just a kind of a performance. Like, we don't want to. It's just kind of like not really the best way to do it, because it's like you have to, like, I don't know, you'd be constantly creating transactions for things you could actually tell beforehand aren't allowed, or like constantly, like, it'd be thrash on your database, all sorts of other things. So that's why we don't have that yet. But maybe we could add it at some point. I don't know.
Then there was another question about types and how Ash will benefit from those in Elixir.
Okay, so we've talked about that a couple times. I would say, like, maybe I'll give a very brief description of it, but maybe go back and watch some of the other. I think maybe even the most recent Office Hours has kind of a conversation about it. But ultimately, like, we're gonna type everything. You're gonna get typed structs for your Ash resources. You're gonna get typed code interfaces. All sorts of other nice type things are gonna happen. We're gonna type the DSL so that you get, like, proper type system level errors when you use, like, the wrong value type, and all sorts of nice stuff is just going to happen for free as soon as we have the ability to work on types. And the moment that that's out, I'm dropping every other thing that I'm working on and making that a reality. So, like, the first time we have a release candidate of Elixir that supports typing in, like, manually putting in type specs, then I'm going to start my work on that, because that to me is one of the highest priority things that we can do to increase everybody's just quality of life in terms of Ash. So there's some challenges. I was actually just talking to Dimitri about this on an issue. A good example of a challenge is that, like, and you're going to have this with ecto schemas as well, is like relationships on ecto schemas can be not loaded or a value. And if the type always represents that, and then you're forced to handle that at any time where you reference the relationship, even though you've already loaded it, you're going to have to do a bunch of, like, janky type system level stuff to have, like, a nicely typed struct. And we're going to have to figure out a strategy for that. I don't know what it would look like, and maybe it means, like, we can't properly type certain. And in Ash, we have that problem way more, because in Ecto, when you don't select an attribute, it's just nil. So it's like nil or the value. But in Ash, it's not loaded or the value for all of those things. And we have forbidden field for all of those things. And so we're going to have to figure out, the thing, to solve for that UX problem. But we have to see what it actually looks like in real life before we can do that.
I don't know, maybe, I don't know, TypeScript has these things where you can have a function that returns true or false, and that depending on the value, it knows that if in the condition that value is set or not. I don't know if the Elixir type system have that or not, so we'll see.
Probably not on day one. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. Maybe it'll even be, like, loose. Like, maybe if, like, the thing you're doing is valid for one of the types of, one of the subtypes of a field, it'll just, like, let you do it. We just don't know. We don't know what it's actually going to look like. I don't know what it's actually going to look like. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah. Then how is the latest chapter, or the last chapter of the book going?
It's okay. It's going well. There's some hiccups at the end here that we're working on. In terms of, we have too much content, and we're not supposed to have that much content, because there's a page limit. We didn't realize that it was as strict as it was. So we are very frustratingly, I imagine, for everybody out there to hear this, we need to remove stuff. We have it. It's all done. Like, we have all of this amazing content, but we have to go trim stuff out of the book in order to meet the requirements of our editor. So that's what's happening right now. People are, if you know Rebecca can be grumpy with the best of them, and she's pretty grumpy about this right now. But yeah, we may have to get strategic with it. We may need to release the last chapter as, like, a free add-on. I don't know what we're gonna do, but we're working on it. So it should be really soon. It should be really soon. Okay, so what do you think about building in a way to handle the custom input transform for providing a record, so you don't have to make a record or ID module. I'm not sure I actually understand that, because that was kind of the... Oh. Yeah, maybe. We could maybe add like some sort of shorthand for that. So you'd have to kind of look into this new transform module, this transform concept that we added for custom inputs to code interfaces. But basically, you have to make like a custom type that represents like an instance of a record or an ID. Maybe. I'm going to show you guys something that I have been noodling over for many years that we may add into Ash that may solve a lot of this problem. Because really the only problem with a lot of our types is that they are very verbose to define one-off types. And so a good like something that we could easily have at some point is something like this. I'm just typing it in chat. Maybe like struct. Okay, sorry, I'm making you all wait, but so we could have a shorthand for defining types that is a macro that like expands to the type and constraints that basically support all of Ash's built-in types and custom types, references, modules. And then it would actually be quite straightforward to define certain kinds of types. And it would just kind of clean up a lot of, complexities. And then we could also have, like, we have, new type. We can just have something like, new type dot define, type, and just like a one-liner that would let you define in some file some new type name. And I think that okay, I was gonna do this a long time ago, but I decided not to. And the reason I decided not to is because right around when I decided that I was gonna do this, Jose announced that they were working on a type system for Elixir. And what I realized is what we actually want is not to have our own version of that syntax, but to be able to use Elixir's version of this syntax and backport it into the equivalent Ash types. Like, so we have a mapping from Elixir's type system to Ash types, so that we can basically like, we don't have to do any of this sort of stuff. We just write a translator. And then the benefit of that is that any function in any module anywhere that is typed can be a generic action automatically. All you have to do is something like use ash.resource at the top, and then say like, typed functions or generic, like functions as generic actions, and then give me a list of function names and arrays. And then because we can grab the type specification, map it back to Ash types, you can basically just define a module with functions and put all of those in an API. And you don't have to do like anything fancy about it. We just have to, it just has to be a type spec that we support. So that would be pretty sick in my book. And so I think that's kind of the reason I haven't pursued this cleaner syntax. So we want to just use theirs. I think that's all the questions we've got so far. Can one of you guys check Discord to see if anybody's asked any questions there? I don't think
No questions on Discord, no.
All right. Well, you guys, you gotta, the timer started. You guys know the drill. Ooh, 18 watching now. I think that might be a record, actually. I think our previous max was 16. Guys, we're famous.
Oh, I remembered one question. So like we have context, like before action, after action, there is like change set and context, but it only if you do it through DSL. So it's like before action built-in change. If you do Ash change set before action, after actions, those do not get context. They just work on change set. So why discrepancy? So it's like why one gets context and the other is not?
Yeah, so the reason is that the change set itself, like, okay, the change set has a context inside of it. it is not necessarily true that you can derive that third context argument from the change set context itself. A good example is when you're running a bulk, maybe not a good example, but an example, is that when you're running a bulk action, when we run your changes, we indicate in that the change is being run in the context of a bulk action using bulk true in the context, right? But the change set itself doesn't know about that. It's like not supposed to know about that. It's just like built up a single change set. You know what I mean? Like it gets like reworked outside of it to run in like batch callbacks and all these sorts of other things. And some changes might be run bulk and some changes might be run individually, like depending on the rules, because a change can say, should you use my batch callbacks? And there's a function called batch callbacks. You can say false. So then it'll iterate over everything in a batch and it'll call the regular change function for each one, right? So the point is that the context is specific to the action, to like to the invocation of the callback. So when we call change, you get this context argument. It's not specific to the change set. And so when you write def change in a module, you get the context as the third argument. So it's the context of us calling change. In what context did we call change? And then you're meant to use that context in any callbacks that you add. But we can't give it to you from when we call the callbacks, because the callbacks are called later. So like it's kind of like weird to describe to I guess, because the real thing is, if we could do it that way that you described, there would be no context argument. You would just always use change set.context. But there are things inside the context that may or may not be.
Weren't you like referring to the after action that you just put into the DSL inside the action, like change after action and an anonymous function? Because there you have more arguments. Is that what you meant, Dimitri? Or
Yeah, I mean, you have Ash change set before action, after action, and you have built-in
Right.
like change after action, change before action,
So,
and
yeah.
both take anonymous function.
Yeah, those get a context because if you write a change and def change, and you get the context to the def change function. So you have context, and then you can say ash.change.after action, and you can refer to the context that you got. So like we don't have to, like, ash.changeset.after action doesn't need to have that argument, because you should already have the context wherever you're calling that function.
Do you?
Yeah.
Because as you said, like when you invoke later, you might invoke it in a bulk and stuff, and like should.
Yeah, you should have it, because the like, if you look at the code, I wonder if I can do this. Hold on.
I mean, it's just what the built-in is doing, right? It's just taking the
Exactly.
context, like it's defining a change, and then it's taking the context and putting that into the after action function that is called as like another argument. That's what you can do yourself if you write the change module yourself. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if this is gonna work if I just move this window over top of Discord. Is this gonna like show? No, it doesn't. It doesn't show it. All right. Well,
I know that you have
I
to
can't
wait.
show you.
Like you can see it in OBS.
Here's let me show you the. Can I copy a link into? What the heck?
You should be able to.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. So if you go to, I just linked it in chat. And then if you go to the actual after action module itself, you can see what it does, like where it gets the context from. Which is what change after action. Yeah, so it just threads the context from the change function. So let me actually link the real place that this lives. Yeah, then you can get you can see, like, it takes the context from def change and passes it into the callback. Maybe not the best explanation, but it is what it is. The hook context has the tenant. It's going to be in the context argument, context.tenant. That's where you get it from. right, guys, folks, ladies and gentlemen. Another more questions or it's over. Need to play like the Jeopardy theme.
Yeah.
Well, it was almost an hour, so it's not bad run.
Yeah, I know. I think this is good. Well, I'll give people one more shot, but we don't tend to want to go over an hour, so we'll see. But also, our viewership is climbing. 20. That's a new record.
Yeah.
20.
I don't know. I'm really looking forward to. Oh, that's great, Eileen. But I'm really looking forward to ElixirConf EU. I think what's the name of the other like live view alternative hologram?
Mm-hmm.
He's presenting as well. I'm really looking forward to that
That's
and see where this is going. Yeah, I'm really interested in that project as well.
I am also very interested in hologram. Like my it's a very ambitious project, but I really like it. I love ambitious projects. I think in a lot of ways it's kind of like Ash, where it's like the whole thing took years to make it like actually work. In a conceptual standpoint, you have to be willing to like bite off these big components of a stack to actually do it, right? Because a lot of people try to make like application development frameworks that just are like these little lightweight tools and like they don't do anything. I don't know. It's not my cup of tea, but I think Hologram is an example of that, where it's like they're owning the whole thing. They wrote like an Elixir to JavaScript, transpiler, so that you could like it's like even more ambitious than LiveView in a lot of ways, because it's like it's like true zero JavaScript in a way. I mean, I guess you might still write JavaScript, but it's actually, I think, even conceptually more ambitious. Which we'll have to see how that pays off, right? So I'm not saying like that it's in some way better than LiveView. I don't know, but it's a pretty exciting concept. Also, yes, Eileen, LanceDB sounds great. Make it happen. It's gonna be great.
Oh, a nice thing that we also saw at AlchemyConf is Xmerada.chat on the topic of docs and stuff. So you can go there and it ingests hex docs and creates embeddings. And then you can ask questions that it will add those embeddings to your prompt so that you get better answers, which was a pretty cool demo.
Yeah, I dropped it in chat. Oh, I just realized chat wasn't playing on our video overlay. Oh, well, it's fine. I don't know if we do chat replay on the YouTube video, but
Oh, it was in the beginning though. Yeah, kind of. Don't know why it stopped.
it was only on my scene where it was just my face. I didn't
Oh,
add it to
okay.
the scene
Yeah.
where it's us as a group. All right, folks. I think we're done. This was a great office hours. Thanks again, Dimitri, for joining us, and welcome to the team. It's great to have you. Thanks, Barnabas, for popping in. We'll see you everybody next month.
Yeah.